Good morning, friends. Once again, I welcome you all to this e-learning platform of KTHM College. In today's session, we are going to have a look at character analysis of the characters in A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. Now, I'll have the character analysis of Hermia from the play A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. Critics often recognize the similarity between Hermia and Helena because both represent the difficulties of adolescent love. But these two young women are more different than their male counterparts, Lysander and Demetrius, who are indeed indistinguishable. Not only do these two young women show the trials and tribulations of young love, but their interactions emphasize the importance of female friendship and the gender expectations that often make women's lives difficult. As the play opens, Hermia is under trial. Her father insists that she should marry Demetrius, the man he prefers, rather than Lysander, the man she loves. Her father reminds the audience that Hermia has no choice in this matter. Hermia is his property, and the laws declare he can dispose of her as he wishes, even if this means sending her to her death. Theseus agrees. According to him, Hermia's father should be a god to her. She is merely a form in wax that has been imprinted with her father's power. Even though Theseus offers her the choice of living in a nunnery rather than dying, he won't allow her to make her own decision about a husband. Her fancy conflicts with her father's will, emphasizing that an adolescent girl has no power against the will of law. Later in the play, Hermia is criticized for her being dark and Etheope in contrast with light Helena's blondiness. Hermia's darkness is significant, reminding us of the racial slurs that continue to plague our culture. Similarly, her fears that Lysander has abandoned her because she is shorter than Helena show that body image issues aren't a recent problem for women. Even in the 16th century, women equated build with desirability, often discovering themselves on the short end of this stick. Hermia's belief that Lysander has deserted her because of her body type also emphasizes the fickleness of love, which is often based not on deep features of character but on trivial aspects of appearance. This is the character analysis of Hermia. Now we'll have the character analysis of Helena. Obsessed over Demetrius, Helena's character emphasizes the capriciousness of love and its excesses. Even though she knows she is making a fool of herself by pursuing Demetrius, Helena cannot stop the chase. She reminds us that love is blind, declaring that she is as beautiful as Hermia, so there is no logical explanation for Demetrius' sudden shift in affection. This point is further emphasized by the two men's love potion-induced attraction for her. Through these interactions, we learn that love is blind, illogical, seemingly produced by magic's sleight of hand rather than reason's honesty. Like a child, lovers are often beguiled by trivial trinkets rather than deep character traits. This message is further heightened by the blandness of Lysander and Demetrius, as Lysander makes clear in his conversation with Aegeus in Act First, no noticeable differences exist between the two men, so Helena could just as easily love one as the other. Besides emphasizing love's arbitrary nature, Helena also highlights the gender differences that vex women. Unlike men who can woo whomever they please, women are not allowed to fight for love. Instead, they must passively wait for the man of their dreams to notice them. In chasing Demetrius through the woods, Helena is breaking the rules of her sex, becoming the pursuer rather than the pursued. She likens herself to Apollo, who chased the unwilling huntress Daphne through the woods. Helena's choice of examples is significant because it emphasizes the violence men, or gods in this case, have often perpetrated against women. Apollo wanted not only to capture Daphne but to rape her. In chasing Demetrius, Helena claims to have appropriated Apollo's role, yet Demetrius is still the one who threatens violence when he vows to do mischief in the wood if she doesn't stop following him. Not only must women patiently wait for her chosen lover to call, but she is also constantly threatened by male sexual violence if she resists unwanted male attentions. What recourse do women have? Banding together. Thus, Helena is upset when she believes Hermia has betrayed her by joining Demetrius and Lysander. Childhood friendships between women should be stronger than the fickle love of men. Her comments make us question the position of all women in the play. For example, what is the source of Hippolyta's passivity in the play? Like Daphne, she has been captured and ravished by a male warrior. Did she lose her power when she lost the society of other women? And what about Titania? Why isn't she angry upon discovering that Oberon has charmed her and stolen her precious Indian boy? By focusing on these instances of male violence, the play implicitly suggests that women should become more active. Notice that Helena, who has actively pursued Demetrius, is rewarded for her proactive pursuit. This is the analysis of Helena. Now we'll have the character analysis of another character, that is Bottom. Probably created as a showcase for one of Shakespeare's favorite actors, Bottom's role involves dancing, singing, and laughter. From his first introduction, Bottom is presented as courageous and outgoing. He is confident in his ability to play any, even all roles in Pyramus and Thisbe. For example, he says his performance of Pyramus will cause the audience to cry a storm load of tears. As the audience realizes this confidence is misplaced and Bottom is little more than a swaggering fool, indeed, and as Perk's prank makes apparent. Bottom's language adds to his comic appeal. For example, he claims that if he performed the role of Thisbe, he would speak her lines in a monstrous little voice, an obviously contradictory statement. Then he would aggravate his voice if he played the lion's role so that the ladies in the audience would not be frightened. Once again, Bottom's word choices show his silliness while adding a comic element to the play. Similarly, rather than worry about his acting performance, Bottom wonders which beard would be most effective for the role of Pyramus. Although Bottom is the locus of comedy in the play, he has a traditional Shakespearean clown. He also draws the audience attention to serious themes such as the relationship between reality and imagination. In preparing for the performance of Pyramus and Thisbe, Bottom continually draws his fellow players' attention back to the question of the audience's gullibility. Will the ladies be upset when Priamus kills himself? Will they realize that the lion is not a lion but an actor? To remedy the first problem, Bottom asks Quincy to write a prologue explaining Priamus is not really dead and that Priamus is not in fact Priamus but Bottom the weaver. In this instance, Bottom focuses the audience's attention on the difficulty of differentiating reality and perception. His solution suggests his belief that the player's acting will be too convincing that they will fully realize the goal of theatre. Similarly, to keep the ladies from being afraid of the lion, he suggests the actor playing the lion show half of his face and explain that he is really a man, not an animal. This belief in the power of theatre extends to his solutions for bringing moonshine and a wall into the play. In creating a wall for the set, he believes covering a man with plaster and some loam will sufficiently convince an audience. Always ready to be surprised, to accept the world's wonder, Bottom believes his audience will be equally susceptible to the powers of art. Bottom's openness to the world's oddities extends to his visit to the fairy realm, which would be viewed as simply another fantasy, much like the theatre. It is ironic that Bottom, the most down to earth character in the play, is the only mortal who meets any of the fairies. When Titania falls in love with him, Bottom isn't surprised, but he does recognize that Titania's statements about him aren't true. For example, that he is an angel or that his looks inspire confidence. At bottom, he knows love and reason don't often work at the same level. Once again, his comments focus on a key, recurring theme of the play: how do love and reason relate? Should love be based on reason or on fantasy? In addition, Bottom's interactions with Titania emphasize the class differences between the characters in the play. As a member of the artisan class, Bottom was literally in a different realm from the regal queen of the fairies. When he returns to the real world, following his stay in the fairy world, Bottom would like to discuss his experiences. He can't. Although he usually is full of language, he is unable to speak about his fairy inspired visions. Instead, he wants Peter Quincy to write a ballad about these experiences. What ordinary language cannot accommodate, poetic language can. Unlike Theseus, Bottom has complete faith in the power of art to capture visionary experiences. Through him, Shakespeare implicitly validates the vision of the artist. This is the analysis of the character Bottom. Next lecture we are going to have character analysis of other characters. Thank you.